vote of the Federal Communications Commission was a big deal. The rest of the world was watching llamas race around Arizona or debating Scottish dress colors. The FCC was actually doing some serious stuff, passing a monumental proposal to regulate the Internet. And that means that the Wild West days of an unregulated net are over, and with a set of rules. Joining us right now to talk about this, one of the commissioners who voted against this deal was a 3-2 vote, Ajit Pai, one of the two Republicans who did vote no, joining us from Washington, D.C. Ajit, you did not carry the day. Title II now reigns. What do you think? What's the first pernicious thing we're going to see because of Title II?
Well, conceptually, the pernicious thing is that decisions about how the Internet is going to work will now, instead of being made by engineers and technologists, be made by lawyers and bureaucrats. But first and foremost, consumers are going to see their broadband bills go up. In a couple of months, the FCC is going to tee up a proposal to increase the tax or to impose a tax on broadband. Immediately, though, providers are going to see their state property and other taxes go up, and those are going to be imposed on consumers as well. So I think the wallet, unfortunately, is going to feel the pinch first.
Yeah, so that tax bill is a separate thing from Title II, though, yes?
That's correct, yes. So the regulations themselves are going to be very far-reaching, as people will see if and when the FCC releases the plan. But some of the immediate effects in terms of the taxation are going to be severe also.
You've been carting around the 322-page proposal showing that it's heft. But what's in it that do you think is really worrisome? You've seen it and the rest of us haven't.
I think just the extent to which the FCC is inserting itself into virtually every aspect of how the Internet works. Net neutrality, if you remember, traditionally was meant to encompass the relationship between an Internet service provider and a customer, the so-called last mile of connectivity. But this document that a narrow majority of the FCC approved yesterday goes far beyond that, regulates the very nuts and bolts of the Internet, such things as interconnection, even second-guessing service plans that wireless broadband providers might offer. And in fact, there's still a lot of uncertainty about how these rules will be applied. The FCC leadership yesterday was asked, well, how will this Internet conduct rule, for example, which is a catch-all rule meant to cover any Internet conduct, how will that work? And he said, and I quote, "We really don't know. The FCC will be able to sit there as a referee and throw the flag." Well, that doesn't really give the industry a lot of certainty and won't leave consumers better off.
Yeah, I thought one of the interesting things, we haven't talked a lot about it, we've talked about this endlessly on the Bloomberg West, we haven't talked a lot about forbearance. When I think about forbearance, it seems to me the FCC is sort of saying, trust us, we'll figure it out later. Is that kind of leeway a good thing or is it a bad thing?
I think it's a bad thing, and especially if you see the document itself, some of the forbearance that the FCC grants is hedged with those classic Washington caveats, for now, at this time. That's pretty cold comfort for innovators in this space. Moreover, some of the forbearance that is nominally granted is it's sort of forbearance in name only. There's still this heavy-handed backstop of Section 201 of Title II, which I know is a little arcane, but essentially everything is subjected to this vague, just and reasonable standard that the FCC is going to implement for the Internet age. And I think there's going to be a tremendous amount of uncertainty, a lot of regulation, and the forbearance will see fade over time as the regulations ratchet up.
Let's talk specifically about the issues of net neutrality. You know, Netflix, for example, has complained that they felt compelled to pay to get a fast lane, and they were thrilled that this passed. So they won't have to make those payments to Verizon and Comcast as they have in the past. That seems a pretty compelling argument, no?
It's compelling on the surface, but from an FCC perspective, when you look at it, it's going to be worse off for everybody, for edge providers and ISPs. It's going to be bad, first and foremost, because the FCC doesn't have the expertise to determine what the agreements that ISPs reach with edge providers in terms of interconnection. But more fundamentally, the question is this. Do you want an unelected bureaucracy, 3 bureaucrats in particular, to make decisions about how the Internet functions? Or do you want to rely on the bipartisan, light-touch regulation we've had for the last 20 years that has allowed companies like Netflix to grow tremendously and reach commercial agreements with ISPs that both sides ultimately can live with? I would much rather have a free market approach that's delivered proven consumer value as opposed to having a Washington bureaucracy make some of those decisions.
So Title II has some interesting hair on it in addition to sort of the transit rules. And things like privacy have some specific Title II requirements. And I wonder what that means for a company like Google, which is providing last mile transit in a couple of communities and a few more to come. but also as a big business that it involves mining customer data. And I wonder if those Title II rules will now mean that Google has to abide by a different administration of privacy rules.
This is precisely the reason why I have said that Silicon Valley tech companies in particular that have been pushing for net neutrality should be careful what they wish for. Now, having classified the Internet access as a Title II service and treated the entire Internet as a utility subject to FCC regulation, one part of the Title II is Section 222, which involves privacy. And there's going to be a tremendous push in some quarters to impose regulations on all aspects of the Internet, not just the ISPs, but the edge providers themselves, to adhere to some of the more onerous privacy restrictions. And I think that over time, we will see whether or not the administration and the FCC chooses to go down that path. And I think that's just one of many examples of the Pandora's box that has been opened thanks to Title II.
Ajit, you guys ruled yesterday that state laws, at least in 2 places, should be overturned, or at least they should get an exemption in Chattanooga and Wilson, North Carolina, to offer local broadband. Is there actual competition in the world of broadband? In the sort of the
I think there
mile?
isn't enough competition, that is for sure. But I think that one of the reasons why I object to this municipal broadband preemption in particular is strictly a legal one. I don't take a particular view on any given municipal broadband project. Some people say they are useful to inject some competition into an uncompetitive marketplace. Other people say that it displaces private investment. I step away from that entire debate. I'm focusing solely on the question that was before the FCC. Under the Constitution and the laws of the United States, does the FCC have the legal power to block state laws regarding municipal broadband? And based on my reading of the Supreme Court precedent and the laws, I say the answer is no.
Okay, so that aside, is there actual opportunity? I mean, I've seen statistics that say 75% of Americans have only one choice when it comes to broadband. And that's getting to be a very big issue in a lot of places because our connection speeds are not as fast as other parts of the world.
And this is precisely one of the reasons why I've said the FCC, instead of focusing on net neutrality, which doesn't address an existing problem, should focus instead on broadband competition. And ironically enough, Title II will drive competition out of the marketplace. We've heard from hundreds and thousands of smaller companies, wireless companies, small cable companies, and others, who have said that Title II is a tremendous mistake and that they don't have the resources to comply with these regulations. So if we push some of these smaller providers out of the marketplace, ironically enough, we're going to have fewer choices for consumers rather than more.
So it's a problem. You agree?
Oh, I do think it's a problem that needs to be solved, but the way to solve it is through market-based solutions, not government knows best regulation.
Does that mean, really quickly, you're going to vote against the Time Warner-Comcast merger?
Well, the merger is pending before us, so I can't comment, of course, on how it's going to proceed. But I think that, generally speaking, a lot of people are interested in this precisely for that reason.
I had to ask FCC Commissioner Ajit Pai, thank you very much for coming on the show. I appreciate it.